Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Truth Table. I am Paul Everton, and today we have four men here to talk about potential remedies, solve problems, and put our ideas together. And I look forward to this show. I have Gordon Berry Jr. is the leader of the Nationalist Constitution Reform Party. We've got Mark Snow has been the leader of the Libertarian Party, Ontario Libertarian Party, for a long time. We've got Peter Taras, who's run for mayor and for the People's Party of Canada, all wanting a better tomorrow for Canadians, and also libertarian-minded, brilliant man, also a chef. I'm not going to give his address because he's my chef, and you can't have him. Get your own chef. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them on one by one. I'm going to pose a question, and I'm going to see, what everyone's ideas are. Like, if you were the leader of the country, what's the one thing you would do with that power to make life better for Canadians? And I'm going to bring in Peter first. Hi, Peter. Welcome.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for having me today. So, interesting question. I guess the most important thing is in our country is the structure of the government. Does it enhance human dignity of the individual? Does it protect individual freedoms, or does it enhance individual human freedoms? Then we have an issue. We have to have a system that protects individual freedoms of the citizenry. If we have a system of government that doesn't do that, then that's the first thing that I think, if we're setting up a hypothetical country like Canada, the first thing, if you get your constitution wrong, you get what's important wrong, then you will never be able to have a country that is flourishing, that will protect people from their government. The purpose of the U.S. Constitution, which I think is a great example, is one that protects the individual freedoms of the people, that does not protect the government. There's no such thing as government rights. There's only individual rights. We were on the right track to some extent in 1982 when the Constitution Act was forged and we had our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There's many things wrong with our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But we need to get rid of, that we need to fix, but also in 1982, we severed ties completely with the monarchy. And yet we have as our head of state a monarch, or a king of a foreign country is our head of state. Nothing is more nonsensical than that. Someone like the Prime Minister, he appoints the Governor General, who answers to the King, our head of state. That's crazy. In fact, our Prime Minister is not directly elected by the people. He's only directly elected by the people in his own riding. We have so many problems with our system, created, I guess, the potential rot that we saw that happened during the Freedom Convoy, where we had our own politicians ignoring the Constitution. And so this was a real problem. They ignored the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They stepped on the citizenry. In 1989, Nicolae Ceausescu, he used police and military to stop a peaceful protest. On December 25th, 1989, he was executed for that. There has been no accountability up to this point for Trudeau doing the exact same thing in Canada. I believe that there should be he should be in jail for what he did to invoke the Emergency Act to use police and military and violence against his own people and against peaceful protesters. And I think that's where I would start with building a society. Is you got to start from the Constitution and you got to start right.
Yes, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask Gordon the same question. What's the one thing you would do if you had the power of the Prime Minister's office to make life better for Canadians? And welcome to the show, Gordon.
Hey, thanks for having me. Anyway, one thing, I don't think one thing is sufficient, but I'll say two things. One thing for sure is people in this country have never actually been in power. They've never actually been the ones in charge. They've never actually had governments working for them. The system by design from the beginning gave the power to the government, and it gave the people the illusion of rights and the illusion of choices. So obviously we have to start from the constitutional crisis. The fact is we don't have a constitution. The constitution that, like I said before in our last one, the constitution that we have with the DNA Act that's been changed by name into the Constitution Act of 1982, that's nothing more than a corporate constitution to separate the powers between the provinces and the so-called national government that doesn't have any authority to rule or govern. So that doesn't say anything about our rights. When people talk about the charter was never brought in. It was like a hijack in a sense by Pierre Trudeau, done on purpose. It was never brought in to give people rights as it would state in the charter. Basically, the idea of the charter was to give the federal government authority that it never had before from the provinces. And for all the people out there that think, they don't like Quebec and so on and so forth, Quebec actually saved us in that because they never agreed to that. So it's not valid. So we have to have a constitutional convention, and that means we have to have delegates from the provinces. And the key difference that I bring into the table is including delegates from all the native nations as well, because they've always wanted to have a voice, and this is their time to have a voice in the governing structure. So that's the key. Get a constitution that locks in our rights. With that, we separate the justice system from the political system so they can't override the rights. And then when they try to go against the rules that are stipulated in the Constitution that we'll come up with as a unified group across the country, then there will be punishment. There will be punishments by that. They will be held accountable. There will be justice. Secondary to that, almost as critical, if not more critical, is taking back the Bank of Canada from the IMF and the BIS and the central bank control, because that's where all the debt comes from. That's where all of this monetary issues come from. Back in '74, when Pierre signed us on to the IMF, that's when our debt started to explode. Prior to that, the Bank of Canada, being our bank, they could, the government could borrow money at virtually no interest or very low interest, if nothing else. And we created our own money, but now it's not our own money. The Bank of Canada, people think it's the Bank of Canada because they call it the Bank of Canada. But again, that's another lie. It is a private corporation. It's controlled by the central bankers. And income tax and things like that people think is going to pay for infrastructure is actually going to pay for the interest on the debt. So by taking back the Bank of Canada, making it our own bank, and that's where the nationalist side of things come in for me, then that gives us control of our economy. We rebuild it to benefit people in this landmass. So with the Constitution and control of our own finances, that's the two keys that I believe we need to do to get the ship righted in this landmass they call Canada.
Well, that was my answer too, as restoring the function of the Bank of Canada to issue interest-free loans to the provinces, to the federal government, as it did before 1974. So that was my answer. I think that would solve a lot of problems. because we could get it to pay the debt, and then it will no longer have interest, so it
Well,
would be
the
able
debt,
to pay it down. No, but I
right?
mean, we could pay off the the shareholders or whatever that are profiting off of our wealth, and that's what they're doing. They're stealing our wealth while sitting down. Anyway, I'm going to bring the question to Mark next. The leader of the Libertarian Party is just recently retiring, but is still going to be a candidate. And great man, great mind, and was a great leader. All right, Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, Peter, and hi, Gordon. Nice to meet you for the first time. Peter, bang on, spot on. Gordon, spot on. I'll just firm that up with both your points, which are valid points, is all rights are derived from property. Something that we don't have in Canada is property rights. Inherent property rights where you own the land, the beneath you and above you. Without property rights, the state controls us. That's the first order of business. It's always been the order of business since the Constitution was originally wrote back in 1863. It was deliberately left out by Brian Mulroney and Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It was only Joe Clark who was actually advocating to ensure that property rights were kept in the Constitution, and he was swept aside because he had no power to do anything about it. That would be the first thing that I would do. Like Gordon said, to reopen the Constitution, but to do it arbitrarily from a winning government seat point of view, is to enshrine property rights, enshrine individual rights and self-defense of property and person. Remove from the criminal code any kind of property crime short of entering in or illegally occupying property. So in other words, no homeowner could be charged for defending their own personal property or their person. Anybody entering into somebody else's property would be subject to the homeowner justice instead of the current way that we have justice. And it's injustice. I'm one of those people that suffered through a 1,006-day trial at the Freedom Convoy. I won gladly, but if we don't have property rights, all other fundamental rights are derived from property. The government's authority stops at your door unless they have extenuating circumstances, i.e. you witness somebody doing a crime on a property, and all that property should be returned to the people to then defend themselves. 2, deregulate as much as the government as possible. End of story. And then, like Gordon said, the solution for the Bank of Canada and Pierre Elliott Trudeau's inception of fractional reserve banking or fiat banking in 1972 is the primary problem. He is absolutely correct in saying that from 1972 on, the only debt that Canada had at that time, when we still had gold, because all debt used to be secured by gold and it was interest free. We held gold. That gold was, you're able to borrow 10% more of what the gold value worth, $1 billion. The government could spend $1 billion plus 10% because gold was expected to go up. When they went off that, if you look at any debt chart from 1972 or 1931 on, you will see it has been nothing but rising of debt. No government has solved it. And like Gordon said, and like Paul has said, they sell treasury bonds. Who owns the treasury bonds? The most wealthiest people in the world. Those are the people at the 1% that control our governments. You all know that through the IMF, WEF, and all these other places that have the ability to influence our political system. And if we were to pay off that debt, they would go broke because they hold and receive the interest that we pay. We're paying almost $2 billion a month federally, $1.8 billion in the province of Ontario, and just debt interest payments alone. That's not the principle. But that would be the first thing to do. Enshrine property rights, enshrine rights of self-defense of property and person. Once you do that, then you have less requirement for state. That means conservation authorities. That means any kind of building code, anything like that. And from that premise, you'd be able to reduce all the regulations, short of environmental. I'm no greenie meanie, but I do believe in clean air, clean water, and clean lands.
Yeah.
So, you'd still have to have, approved septic system. But other than that, live in a mud brick house built out of seal skins that you clubbed off the coast of Newfoundland, as far as I'm concerned. How you live is your business on your property, and if you want to live that way, then that's where you should live and be free of being emboldened to debt and forced into a banking system. That's it. Thanks, Paul.
Great answer. And like I said to Peter earlier, you know, the five of us could basically save Canada with our ideas, and you know. But our last person to answer the question is my chef, libertarian friend. I'm not going to give his address because he's my chef, and you can't have him. You get your own chef. Welcome, Brandon. I'm so
Thank
glad
you. I got some questions for Mark, but I think I'll hold those for now and just answer the question that you've asked. And I believe in a relatively moderate approach to large sweeping changes in government. And I also think that when an idea is right, it holds weight in the real world, and that people also end up wanting it when it's in their own interest. So I think I would start by taking all the government monopolies that we have, such as healthcare, education, any kind of private sector that the government has held a monopoly on, and that forces people to pay for these monopolies through tax dollars. And I would immediately privatize them, keeping the public system in place while allowing for private options. So in the beginning, you'd still pay the same amount of taxes, but you'd have the option as to which system you get to buy into, get choose into. So in healthcare, in Ontario, OHIP is an insurance company. It would allow you to select your insurance company that your money would go to, and then you would have different health coverage in the hospitals. And then based on that, you have differing results. So it breaks the government monopoly. And I think what we'd find is that our government systems nobody would want, that they would want to pay for the private systems. And at that point in time, you start opening up more options. You say, well, do we really want to, is this something that really should be paid through tax dollars, or should it be privately funded? Or the discussion for that then gets opened up. But I think, especially considering that we're in a democracy, that any sort of wide sweeping changes, especially in Canada, Canada tends to be fairly liberal. Your cold climates are generally liberal. When you get down into hot climates, they tend to be more conservative. So given that we live in a cold climate and that people tend to be liberal minded here, making wide sweeping changes that are very unpopular, I think is just the end of a government. That people have to be on board with what you're doing. Otherwise, you can't do anything. Yeah. So I think a system in which you open things up and show the fruits of your labor, make people make a decision to say, hey, I'd rather have this healthcare card than the other one, because I get, I sign up for a healthcare that makes me pay 1%. And because of that, I get almost twice the coverage, because it turns out that about 50% of the waste was solved by just charging 1%. And so you've got X extra coverage. And so people go, well, I'll take that one. I'll pay the 1%, So that's how I would start.
Okay. You had a question for Mark? Yeah.
So my question for you in terms of property rights, I can understand what you're saying with property rights on an individual level, a private level, but a very significant amount of property right now is owned by corporations. It doesn't have there's a board of directors, and there's a CEO, and there's also shareholders that are involved. So how does how does this rights of property work with, you know, something like a Google campus?
I really don't understand the question as in relating to Google Campus. Property rights, we're talking about private property. We're not talking corporate. If you're a corporate entity and you want to have a board of directors and a million acres of land and build a million houses on it and rent them out, that's business. What I'm talking about is individual private property rights for the individual. The PPC has great individual rights. They're almost libertarian in the sense of that. Our First Nations, they have no rights, zero rights to property, zero rights. If we're going to empower the people, then we have to deregulate the state. You're sort of getting there. Deregulating the state in regards to private property rights simply says that the government's authority ends at your driveway on your piece of property, and you have no authority. The Ontario Building Code, in this case, I live in Ontario, the nothing. The only thing that would apply provincially from that side of the house would be environmental regulations. Obviously, you can't open a battery acid plant on your private property, and you can't poison your neighbor's wells. So there would be environmental protections to protect other people's, and then mechanisms within the court system to be able to then sue your neighbor if he does open a battery acid factory or has 10,000 pigs that leach manure onto your property. Environmental protections are important, but only for the land, air, and water quality. That's it. None of the carbon tax, all that other stuff is gone. All those taxes are just simply servicing the debt. You have $1,000 a month credit card bill, and your payment is $10. You increase that to $10,000, and it goes to $1,000 a month. This is what's happened. Every tax program since 1972, and actually before that, has just simply been to fund the debt, and the revenue streams of the government coming in need to match the debt to be able to keep their Moody's credit rating. All taxation under the guise of whatever program it has is only for the purpose of servicing the debt. Ever increasing debt, ever increasing taxation to meet for it. Every time the government manipulates money or puts a tariff or a charge or something like that, you know, two bags of Ruffles chips 6 years ago were $5. Now they're $13. Well, they doubled the price of that, and they doubled the amount of taxes. They literally double revenue overnight by creating inflation through regulatory programs. That's how the system works. Why haven't we had a personal income tax rise in the last 40 years? Because they've come up with all these programs that creates inflation, which doubles the revenue. Each and every year, they try to go 2%, 5%, between 20 and 25, and went at 17, 18%. And they've doubled the revenue. Doug Ford can give away free driver's license now and free plates for your car because he has so much revenue coming in due to the inflation caused by the federal government that he can give away free license plates. So how does that relate? That's how it relates, if that answered your question.
Yeah. So you're advocating then a partial restriction on criminal law being restricted on private property, and all municipal law being just thrown out if it's on private property.
Correct. Our Ontario platform eliminates the conservation authorities, eliminates the Municipal Act, eliminates the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and all those go back onto your local tax. And
right. But you're keeping the provincial, the environmental.
Yes, absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, if we don't protect our land, air, and water, then we die. We don't have clean drinking water. You know, rule of 3. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. You've got to have those basic protections in place. And I don't want to.
And some of the
come between me.
Some of the criminal would be cut out too. Yeah.
Some of the criminal what?
Some criminal law would not apply then on private property too.
Not at all. Not at all. Criminal law, if you trespass, I can call the police. I don't have to kill anybody. I can hold them at bay with a firearm, which is 5 years in jail for illegal firearms owner right now. If I brandish a firearm while you're in the commission of a crime on my private property, if I brandish a firearm, I'm going to jail. I'll be there for 3 days waiting to get out, and the criminal will be bailed out within 12 hours. So, no, criminal trespass laws and things like that, criminal code would still apply, and criminal code is federal, by the way, except for some aspects of provincial. I don't want to, Paul, please.
No,
I
it's
could go
okay.
on for hours. You know I could.
No, well, this is great. I would love to have you on again. Actually, I'd like to have you all on again because we all have so much to share. Gordon, did you want to say something? Add to what was being said about
Well,
property rights and
yeah. So that's that. To go to that on an individual basis, I don't believe is necessary. It's complicating things for people. And the reason I say that is not to just to throw it aside, because that's part of the Constitutional Convention issue. And basic property rights and things like that will be dealt with in the actual Constitution. That's what's going to enshrine the rights of the individual that you're born with, that are inherent, unalienable, and so on. And again, in order to achieve that, then of course you have to separate from the Crown. You have to end that contract with the Crown because they claim the ownership of the majority of the land here, Crown land.
right.
And so who gave them the right to come over here in the beginning and plant a flag and said they own it, do whatever they did with the natives and sign treaties and take away their rights and turn them into privileges and all these other things. So you don't have to specifically talk about property rights, because those would, in my mind, or from my concept at least, those are going to be included in the Constitutional Convention because those are key elements. Now, you take the same property right issue and you move forward, and then you recognize that the federal government doesn't truly have any authority to rule at all, because they don't have any property. They don't own any property. They were never given any property. There was not even transferred from the Crown or the UK Parliament or anything like that. So you cannot be sovereign without owning the property that you're ruling from. So the federal government, literally, everything that they're doing is fraud. It's all illegal. But they create the legal system to protect themselves. So
yeah.
That's the whole concept of this. So it's you can get into a whole, obviously some people here understand we can go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes, but they don't have any authority to rule because they don't own the property they own. They even admit that they're on unceded territory. I think it so-called belongs through the process to the government of Ontario. It's leased out to the federal government, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, they have no sovereignty to rule from. So, but all of these things have to be, so those are the real three big things: separation from the Crown. And the way you do that, everybody's going to make it complicated with legalese and all this kind of stuff. So I would take it in, and I'm not a fan of Trump, but I would take it in Trump's mindset. This is it. When the people support what I'm all about, then we become the voice of the people. So if you're becoming the government, you are the voice of the people. So the contracts are null and void. Every contract that has any amount of fraud in it anywhere is not a valid contract to begin with. So I'm just ending it over. And people talk about paying the debt. I have no interest in paying this $2.2 trillion to these international bankers, because it was never our debt to begin with. That was a fraudulent contract. Pierre Trudeau never had the authority. Now remember, if he never had the authority to govern as a prime minister, because they don't own any land to govern from, so they're not sovereign, then where did he have the authority to sell off the Bank of Canada or make that deal with the IMF? So therefore, the debt is not valid. So it's just ended. And there's a lot of problems that could come from whatever. But the point is, the people have to be in control. And I don't see any governing system that's ruling over the people. At every level, things will be overseen by the people. It'll always be accountable to the people. That's the key, because we do it all. And we're supposed to be, the government is only supposed to ever have been there to protect our rights. That's it. Of course, there's some policing that needs to happen, and you would do that more like the sheriffs in the states, where they're voted for by the people, and the municipalities or counties or whatever, so they're accountable to the people. But you never have these corporate entities ruling over the people with no accountability and them getting away with whatever. But the key to that is, like I said, you can complicate all of these issues that we have to deal with. But the way I look at it in a simplistic form is all of these issues will be dealt with in the Constitution. And once that Constitution is enshrined, that's it. With the courts separate from the political structure, because you can't have the two married together, then they can't. The political structure can never in the future step on the rules in the Constitution that exist, because the legal structure is separate and they will be held accountable.
Mm-hmm. Peter, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in too, actually. Mark said something interesting about the outsourcing of self-defense to the individual. I think it's a great idea, but consider where we're living right now. We're living in a country where we demand our government pay for our housing, to pay for everything. It's not realistic. So even when the question was posed to me by Paul, I took it as more of a hypothetical question of what are the biggest problems facing us that I think we all agree on is the private property ownership. That's huge. But also outsourcing our self-defense. I mean, some people, I look at the police as a government service. If I choose to use them, I call them. If I don't, I like that idea. I think that's very sensible. Many people don't have the capacity or the skill set or the mindset in order to engage in their own self-defense, so they have to outsource that to the police, which I'm totally good with. So I'm not really in favor of, especially considering in the country that we have people, every single politician in our country voted for something as perverse as the gender transitioning of children. They've all voted for this WEF protocol, this WEF, what's it called? It's the UN Health Treaty, something along those lines. Every single politician has been supporting that. Leslie Lewis is speaking out against it. But we're living in a country where there's reality of dealing with people who voted in a government that stomped on the rights of Canadians during the Freedom Convoy. Nicolae Ceausescu in 1989, on December 25th, was executed for ending a peaceful protest using police and military against his own people. This is exactly what Trudeau did when he invoked the Emergency Act against the Freedom Convoy. This is exactly the same thing. He was executed for it. Our politicians, not Trudeau, who is the spearheading of that violation of our individual rights and freedoms, and he has felt no justice for that, and I think that's a huge problem. I think if we did have our own capacity and to defend ourselves, then would this end well for us? I don't know if it would end well for us. What we need is a police force willing to hold the politicians accountable. Because in a situation like the Freedom Convoy, if we were all agents of our own self-defense, that would get very dangerous very fast, because that was such a potentially volatile situation that the people who were running it, the people who were going to it, understood that. They knew that they needed to be peaceful in order, because that's what every communist does. They want to create a revolution. They want to create violence so that they can blame it on the people. Even if they committed the violence, they will blame it on their adversaries. This is why, if we're agents of our own, if we're completely agents of our own free will, or if we're agents of our own self-defense, then that could cause a lot more problems, because many people are not trained. And if we're all trained for that, I'm all for that. If we have self-defense, people learn how to use a firearm, they learn the Constitution starting in grade 1, they learn their own rights, they learn what the police can and can't do. This would be great. I would say the first 8 years of school ought to be teaching that, so that is, rather than teaching that a boy can become a girl, which is literally what they're teaching now at many of the grade schools. It's insanity right now what they're teaching. But if they taught real things, which they're not teaching, and they haven't been teaching anything like that for the last 80 years, so it's no wonder that we have a citizenry that also is not willing to take responsibility for their own actions.
I just want to respond. I don't want to jump on anybody's toes, but I want to respond to what he's talking about with the police. So anyway, the reason that the police aren't doing anything with the politicians is because that's who they work for. The federal government employs the RCMP, and every other government, whether on the provincial level, the OPP, and so on and so forth. And then the RCMP can be subcontracted to provinces. So they're never going to arrest their employers. That's the whole trick of the game. And I've talked to these police officers when I try to serve documents and get investigations done into informed consent and so on. But That's the problem. And too many people don't want to talk about the corporatocracy, the structure that they built that we live under. They control everything. And the biggest thing that most people don't want to talk about or don't understand is these politicians are merely puppets. They're not the ones pulling the strings. They're not the ones making the decisions. They're just the ones, doing what they're told from above. Again, going back to the central bankers and so on. So the RCMP are never going to arrest the politicians. Trudeau, sure, he should be in jail for massive different things. They all should be in jail for, and I'll say it, and a lot of people don't want to talk about the big elephant in the room, but we have a worldwide genocide taking place, and nobody wants to cross that barrier. But that's facts. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that's facts. And they should all be arrested. We treat these people, not me, and probably not most of the people on the show, but they treat these people like pseudo celebrities, and they walk around and they cheer for them. They're literally robbing us at every turn, and they're causing a massive loss of life. And this is much bigger than this landmass that they call Canada. This is a worldwide agenda. So we can't just, we have to focus on this landmass for sure, but we have to see that there's a bigger power structure beyond these governing bodies and these puppets that are acting in this theater that they call the House of Commons. Leslie Liu was speaking about the WHO, but whatever. I mean, that's just part of their deal. Like, that's the theater of it all. They have to have somebody saying one thing against to counteract what everybody else is saying. And you can go back to the budget scenario and the whole entire fraud that went on there. They hung us for 2 months, and the Conservatives are screaming about the budget and everything else. And then the bottom line became that the budget passed, and then the Conservatives basically were afraid of an election. Well, I didn't want an election either, because that's another $600 million wasted for the illusion of choice. That's never going to change anything for us, no matter who's in power that's existing at this point. So I wasn't for the election, but they're telling everybody how horrible this budget is, but they didn't want an election. So at the end of the day, you can't have one without the other. If you don't want the budget to pass, and don't pass it. But if that happens, then you got to have an election. And if you're not confident in yourself to win an election, because they're all thinking that the Liberals are going to win a majority, then what are you out there telling the people that you're going to save them and you're doing all this work for when you don't even have confidence in your own party? So there's all of this subversion going on with people's minds that they don't understand. It's all to keep them engaged in the structure. But the main reason I wanted to comment, I got on a bit of a tangent, I apologize, but that's the reason that the police aren't doing anything. And that's why I said that the policing structure cannot be a corporate level structure. There is a body, obviously a police or whatever, but that has to be in a situation like it is in the United States. They've done some things right, and they've done a lot of things wrong, and their constitution's been hijacked. And they're not even running by the constitution that they believe they're running by. And they have the enclave clause, which gave federal government some that authority. So their country's in as much of a mess as ours. But that's one thing they did right, is having on the local level. That's where it should be, on a municipal level. You don't need a national police force that for the people. I mean, you can have something like that for security, or things like that. But having sheriffs and deputies that are voted on and accountable to the people directly in their own community, that's where you're gonna start righting the ship. And then if politicians, again, because this whole system is separate from the political system, if they want to commit crimes, that there's not going to be two levels of crime or law in this landmass anymore.
Boy, I'd like to follow that one up. You're bang on in everything that you said. And the first way to do that is provincially. The problems that PPC and other federal and provincial have is that like Gordon said, the state dictates the rules, and your MPP is dictated by the party whip and the party leadership. You have the illusion. I love the way that you use that, Gordon. The illusion of democracy, because it is in Canada. We have the illusion of democracy. Your MP and your MPP actually work for the parties. They don't work for you, even though they tell us we have this illusion that we're voting for a person that's going to represent me. They don't. They represent the party. From an Ontario perspective, we were going to deregulate the Municipal Act and deregulate the party so that you're actually governed by your MPP. That's simply, the legislation is wrote. We've wrote all of the legislation to do that. I am no longer the leader as of Saturday. I was replaced by Sean Conroy, He's been my mentor that I've been training to bring into our side and push this new libertarian platform. And your MPP represents you, and consensus has to be gained within Queen's Park to be able to pass any bill that you want to do, i.e. if you have enough a majority that represents your view, then you have to go to all the different parties or all the different individuals to get back to that. And that's more closer to the sheriff idea that Gordon's talking about, whereas your MPP that you elect actually represents you, and you can hold a plebiscite or a referendum within your riding to see if you actually want to do anything, just like electing a local sheriff. And you're right, Gordon, that's the way to do it. The OPP should be disbanded except for high-level provincial needs. There should be very little OPP, and it should be all local. Alberta is going that way. Alberta is already there in the sense that they have local sheriffs. They don't have and don't want the RCMP. But Gordon is right. That's where we need to go to be able to get the actual real policing back and make them accountable by election, not appointment. Sorry,
in many of our provinces, they don't even have their local. They don't even have a provincial police force. They hire the RCMP to come in and police.
Yeah. So with Alberta, though, be careful what's going on in Alberta, because you know, when they're talking about getting rid of the RCMP, which is good on the surface, and that's how they always pull these games on us, because it always looks good on the surface, and then they want to bring in municipal police and things like that. But remember, our municipalities are controlled by the United Nations, so effectively, even though there are men and women that live here and have been in police for a while, they're effectively putting a UN police force on the streets of Alberta, and that's not going to play well for this long term. And you know, some people, I've talked to people about that, and they just said, you know, we got to just do one bite at a time. But you better be careful which bite you take off first, because our municipalities are controlled by the UN.
Yeah, if you just follow Maggie Braun and Kickley, you'll see the work that she's doing to try to get that out of the municipal structures across Canada. She's been going all across Canada, forcing these municipal councils to acknowledge that that's what they've done, exactly like Gordon said, and then have them get out of it, rescind their council declarations.
So one thing you mentioned, though, you did mention about party structures, and I think we have a real problem, and I think a big problem in Canada is the way the parties are structured. As an example, I was a conservative, and I went to a policy convention, which is one thing you'll never find in the PPC, and people say that's a really bad thing because the grassroots can't come there and speak their mind. Well, the way it worked in the Conservative Party when I was at a convention in Winnipeg in 2002 is it was infiltrated. Every leftist, every collectivist came there. They all had their issues. They were talking about debt forgiveness of student loans. They were talking about basic income. They were talking about all these things that the left and the collectivists and the communists are pushing. That's who was at these conservative policy party conventions. It wasn't to promote, conservative ideology and conservative ideas. It was there to promote these Marxist ideas. The PPC doesn't have that. The way the PPC works, it has a leader. The policy is set out on the website. You go to the website, you read the policy. If you agree with it, you join the party. If you do not agree with what's on the policy platform, you move on to another party. Maybe you move on to the Libertarian Party. Maybe you move on to another party. But it's very clear, it's transparent. It's not going to be changed by infiltrators who come to a policy convention that the PPC will never have. It can only be changed by the leader. This is the way. And a lot of people say, oh, it's because the PPC is a cult because you're only following your leader. I'm following the leader because he's the one who's best articulating the ideas that he has put forward. It's not because I'm following him because he's got nice hair or he's tall, but I'm following him because he has conviction and he's willing to stand for the ideas that he put forward. And I think that's what we all are doing as well, is we're standing for the ideas that we believe in, and that's what he is doing. And what you don't see in the Conservative or Liberal Party or any of these mainstream parties is they poll to see which ideas will become more popular. It has nothing to do with enhancing human freedoms or protecting individual dignity. It has to do with what will get them more votes. So they're, in some ways, they're engineering compliance, but at the same time, they're also trying to see where the mindset is already. So they'll try to engineer a little bit of conformity, but then they also want to take the conformity that's already there and manufacture their party platform based on that. And that's a problem. And that's it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's all kinds of party politics issues out there for sure. All of these, you know, and the whips and like, at the end of the day, the structure is weird. We don't have any choice. Like they swear they're out to the crown, the corporation of the crown. It's not actually to the king; it's to the corporate entity with the crown. So they're gonna, and they serve the parliament. There's no accountability to the people. The local case clearly states that when one time they tried to sue their MP because he lied in his campaign and it didn't work out. And the judge even said there's no way to hold them accountable to the people. So that's an obvious issue. And you know, the PPC party, I'm not here to bash anything or anything, but the bottom line is if we're not going to fix the serious structural issues, including the central bank issue and true league separation from the crown and the constitutional foundational issue, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who gets in power. We're doomed. That's the bottom line. This is a world thing that's taking place, and if we don't get in control and come together, this isn't an attack on anybody. I'm just saying if the people that really want to make change don't get on the same page and get together under one umbrella, move forward to bring true justice back to this world and accountability, we're in big trouble. And no, I don't see. And again, it's no attack on anybody, but that's the reason why I went the way I went. And when I put the stuff that I put in my platform, when I put this whole thing together, it was a difficult process for me in my mind because I know these things are necessary to create the change that we all need. But I also comprehend completely that a vast majority of the people don't understand what I'm talking about when I say these things. So it's gonna shock them, and they're gonna be looking like, "What is this?" You know, it's so you kind of maybe lose people on that. But if I can't put the truth out there to begin with and be completely transparent and know enough about what these individual aspects are to explain it when I'm questioned about it and the reason why it's necessary, then I'm starting on the wrong foot to begin with. And what I'm saying, what I see from every other concept, every other party, if it's not an attack, it's an observation, is if you're not going to the serious structural foundational issues, the constitutional issue, the crown issue, and the central bank issue, then truly you really have to relook at what you're trying to accomplish, because you will not accomplish it. Remember, when you really start to comprehend that this is a world issue, it's leading to one world government structure. And people can think that's conspiracy, but that's truth.
I have a question for you, Gordon. Do you believe that you can change for example, our connection to the IMF? Do you believe we can fix the Constitution politically?
Yeah. So the issue with the IMF, and as I said before, every contract that's ever been signed by a governing structure that has no true authority is not a valid contract. So it's not legal. They're fraud. So
I agree with you on a lot of the things you said, almost everything you said. But do you think the people will elect you in the riding that you're running in to make those changes?
That's what this is up to, bro. The bottom line is I put it out there. I put it out there because that's the truth. That's what I see we need to accomplish, and I can explain it to people. And when I did this, though, I want you to understand this. It's up to the people. This isn't about me becoming prime minister. I look at this like we're in such serious situation now that more people are being forced to see truths that they wanted to avoid, they never wanted to see, and so on and so forth. And when they start recognizing how serious the problems are, from debt and tyranny and forced vaccinations and mandating this and losing all this stuff that's going on in this world, when they're being forced to see that, if they don't have somewhere to turn that's going to fix these problems, then they're going to be lost. But at the end of the day, if the people don't get behind this, then there's nothing more I can do. All I've done is put, a mechanism in front of them for them to take advantage of and hopefully build it. I'm not the most intelligent guy in this landmass. What I'm looking for, obviously, is strong people. I believe that there's people from every profession that recognizes what's going on in the world, from the legal profession, the medical profession, education, all of this stuff. And I'm looking for, strong people in all of them different aspects to build this out. But can this be done? If I didn't believe it could be done and I didn't believe that the people would get behind it, then I would never do it. So I believe, yes, it can be done. Is it going to be difficult? Absolutely, it's going to be difficult. But one thing that I always say, to make it as simplistic as I can, I would rather go through the difficulty of fixing the problems that's destroying every one of our lives than just sit back and accept the difficulties that are coming, because they're going to be a level of insanity that most people can't even comprehend.
Well, I've read all your parties. I read the Libertarian platform. I've read the People's Party platform. I've read the National Constitutional Reform Party, and I agree with everything on all those platforms. Yet somehow the media doesn't agree with me. So I mean that's a big issue for me. I mean, how we have good men with good ideas. How do we unify our country to say,
Money.
okay, we've had enough? Is it money? Is it money to be
In
able
order
to
to get your message out,
advertise?
if it isn't censored, you need to be able to use the existing streams that we have in social media. That takes money to advertise. I'm telling you, I've been in some major debates, major debates, health coalition debates against raging leftist socialists, and 2.5 hours and 2-hour debates here and there. And people in the audience, I can see them shaking their head going, yeah, he's making sense. He makes sense. We should do this. We should do this. And then they turn around and go vote blue, vote red, vote orange. It is disheartening to know that you're making, like Gordon, you're amazing what you're doing. You're amazing. Your heart, you can see it. It expresses in your eyes. But the challenge, and the challenge is always valid. The challenge is always real, and the challenge is always needed. It's what keeps us going.
Mhm.
But it's going to take a collapse. It's going to take something tremendous, an economic collapse, or a calamity of, I don't know what it is, for people to wake up to see. They know it's there. They know the Freedom Convoy was all orchestrated for villainizing peaceful protesters. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
The only people that don't are the people that watch the CBC and the mainstream narratives. Nobody's tuning into that. So 80% of Canadian population is actually turning to alternative media or social media to get their actual truths. It's only my generation, the over 60 crowd, which I haven't watched TV in 15, almost 20 years, is the ones that are being led. And it is the education level people on the elementary right up through college years is being guided and demented and indoctrinated by the education system and the college systems. And there's nothing that we can do about it. And it's funny because 25 years ago, before I was libertarian, I used to think that, oh my God, it's like crazy. You grow up being a liberal when you're in high school thinking, I want someone to pay for my education. This is unfair. It's not right. And then you go out and get your first job and you can't get a job in the field that you want. And then all of a sudden you have kids and you're turning into a conservative because you don't have any money left from your paycheck because they took so much of it. And that seemed to be the way that culture naturally went on its own, from starving student to trying to make money and protect my taxes into conservatism, from liberalism to conservatism. And then when you got older, you started thinking NDP for more health care. But today they are told they are wrong. They are told they are racist. They're told they're bad people if they don't swallow the cultural pill of the indoctrination system of our public education system. There is a way to fix it. There is absolutely a way to fix it. And if anybody even wants to hear, I can tell you how to fix it, and we can fix it in 5 years. Because that's our platform to do it that way. And I'm not promoting that. And like Gordon, you are not putting anybody down. You are simply speaking your God's honest truth coming out of your mouth that's real. As far as I'm concerned, you are real. You're the real deal in what you believe in. Don't ever distance yourself.
I believe in him too. I mean, that's why he's here. I've seen him speak, and he does speak from the heart. Actually, all of you do. All of you do. I see that. And I'm seeing open crime here because we're going in all this debt, but our immigrants are getting halal mortgages. So they got no interest, like the Bank of Canada, how it's supposed to be, interest-free loans. They're giving that to immigrants, but
Well,
not to us.
kind of,
The
sort of, but you got to be careful, Paul, because a halal mortgage is not, it's interest free because of their so-called, you know, beliefs or
Yes,
whatever. But they pay fees and stuff. So they pay fees and stuff for them halal mortgages. And then the other thing that nobody's ever talked about is go look at kosher loans. They get the Jews get, they get their money for free. There's no interest. I shouldn't say the Jews, because the Jews aren't the bad people. The Zionists, I would say, are the bad people. But
Yes.
seriously, kosher loans is just as bad, or mortgages, that's just as bad as the halal stuff. But nobody talks about that because they're painting this image of the, you know, and there is an extremist side of Islam for sure, and they have this ideology to take over the world. But truly, they're the brooms of the Zionists. They're the ones doing all the dirty work on the ground. So be careful with the halal mortgage, because remember, everything that we read in the media is put there to distract us and to get us going down these rabbit holes and stuff. So if you don't have some discernment and look a little bit deeper, you're not really thinking for yourself. They're controlling everything that you do and say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like personally, I have a craving for cloned meat and GMO corn, but without the labels, you know,
Bugs.
I will never be able to satisfy my inherent right to choose and fulfill my desire to eat it.
That's where it comes back to the worldwide issue. That's why I'm talking about. Like some of us look at this like we got a political issue here in Canada, and we do, but they're just the puppets. This stuff that's happening, you know, the immigration issue, that's a UN policy. Replacement migration. It's called replacement migration on purpose. You know, that's so who's in charge of the UN, WEF, and all? Who's running the show above them? Like, them guys are just another level, but it goes beyond that. So this really is a worldwide issue, and people got to. It's hard to, you know, it's really hard to talk to the public, because a lot of the stuff that you say when this is the truth, and they get, you know, oh, these, you know, but if we don't start sharing more of the truth, the people are never going to accept it as the truth. They're always going to see us being thrown out there as conspiracy theorists or whatever. So whether people taking it for real or not, I'm just going to keep going on with the truth and back it up.
Yeah, you're right. You know, I mean, when people hear it, I was out canvassing in the last federal election, like you probably were as well. I was out 6 months. For 6 months before the election was called, I was out knocking on doors 3 days a week. By the time the election was called, I had knocked on almost 20,000 doors. I had identified every single one of my voters. When they hear the ideas, like if they heard what you said, if they heard what Mark said, they would hear these ideas. They would be like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And then some of them even put my sign on their lawn, and then they ended up voting conservative or liberal. So will it take, it's not money, because you were saying it's money, Mark. It's not just money. It's about people's mindsets. You can throw everything at them. They've been indoctrinated for 60 years. You could spend $1 million trying to convince one person that you're the right guy to vote for, and they'll still vote for it. So that's why it's not necessarily money. It's about changing hearts and minds, and it's about authenticity, showing that you truly believe what you believe and why you're there, and you're willing to even lose, because you're more concerned with truth and being faithful rather than just being successful. Yes, I want to be successful. You want to be successful. You want to win, but not at any cost. And this is the big thing, that the blue and the red and all the establishment, they don't care about that. They don't care about truth. They don't care about principles. They care about winning. And that's why they fit perfectly well into this globalist agenda that only wants useful idiots. They don't want people of principle trying to come up with ideas that will enhance human dignity. So that's just one other thing.
Yeah. So one way, it's very difficult to talk to people that's got their mind made up and they've been blue or red their whole lives, and it's hard to change your mind. But the one thing you can't, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time with people that aren't willing to listen. You have to spend some time with them. But the one thing I try to do is make sure that everybody's aware that both parties are responsible for the mess that we're in on 100% level. Every one of them has had part. Brian Mulroney, you know, everybody cheers him, you know, especially when he died recently and so on and so forth. But he's the one that signed the document to sign our friggin' municipalities over to the United Nations. Stephen Harper is the one that made the deal with FIFA, you know, behind, you know, closed doors, kind of surreptitiously, to give China all of these rights to buy land and property in Canada and businesses and stuff for 31 years locked in. Nobody can do anything about it. And Stephen Harper, that's a groomer of Pierre Poilievre. Stephen Harper signed us on to Agenda 2015. You know, all of these things go on and on and on. So people got to realize that both parties are the problem. But I don't know. You can't waste too much time trying to convince people. You just plant seeds and hopefully they pick it up. And hopefully, I hate to wish people bad, but hopefully as the times get tougher, people are going to recognize and they're going to start realizing that we got to do something.
That's the only thing it's going to take. That
Yeah.
is really the only thing it's going to take. When you got 40% of the workforce in Canada works for the federal, provincial, or municipal level, and they are really, other than the auto sector or the, I don't know, maybe some of the tech sector left, there's no manufacturing base. So anybody who can afford a car with a credit rating now works for the federal, provincial, or municipal governments. Anybody buying a house is new immigrants and public servants on all three levels of government. And that could be police, that could be nurses, that could be doctors, that could be government workers. So the manufacturing base, as Gordon has said, was raped and stolen from Canada through high taxes and regulations in Pierre Elliott Trudeau's time. And every government since has regulated the ability to run a business in Canada. Canada as a whole, across, let alone provincial problems. Federally, they've made it so difficult to even run a blue or have a blue collar business anymore because, well, you can't compete through the taxes and regulations and red tape with a China that has none, right? So there's an economic argument to having cheap labor. Cheap labor comes at the cost of low regulations, and that's why we are no longer competitive, and that's why we needed the Brian Mulroney tariffs or free trade. People don't understand that free trade is the worst thing in the world. If I had $100 billion tomorrow and wanted to make a $10,000 car, which you can, Toyota's selling a $20,000 truck right now. You can buy it for $20,000, $12,000 basic model, 4x4 radial roll-up windows. And they refuse to allow it to come to North America because it would interfere with the car market. Now, that being said, if I was in Canada and had $100 billion and spent $20 billion to bring a new car to market that cost $10,000 Canadian, $6,000 US, it would be illegal to sell it. It would be illegal to sell it. You couldn't sell it. You might be able to sell locally to someone around here, but you couldn't export it because of the trade agreements. Libertarians believe in no trade barriers, free trade, not regulated USMCA or NAFTA. NAFTA is just a protectionist system that Mulroney set up to protect corporations to ensure that they never had any competition. USMCA has done exactly that on even a greater level to stomp out any kind of competition in Canada or North America for that reason.
Listen, gentlemen, I have to go. I thank you so much for this great discussion. Mark, great meeting you. Gordon, great meeting you. Brendan, I'm looking forward to having a cup of your homemade root beer, your personally made homemade root beer. And Paul, will thank you again for the invitation. I'm really grateful. I appreciate this conversation and keep it going.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Peter.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
All right. And then there were four.
Yes.
Oh, please.
Brendan,
me.
I haven't heard much from you this.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about what Peter was saying about it not all being money. That there's an element of winning hearts and minds, but I think it might go a little farther than that too. People make decisions in very different ways in different circumstances. For example, when we had COVID here, and there was the whole getting vaccinated issue, and everybody, the government wanted everybody to get vaccinated, and they had their vaccine passports and things like that. If you had to pay for those vaccines, the story would look very different. People would not accept a mandated system for something that they had to pay for. And so one of the primary mechanisms that was used in that case was the fact that it was being offered for free. And so when let's say you had to pay for that and it was $100 or $200. Well, the argument we made, well, there's some people who can't afford it, or, I have my own budget and I decide where my money goes. And people hold on to that very strongly. So it really changes the discussion a lot in terms of what people think and about whether they're willing to accept something or not, based on, in this case, whether you have subsidization of a vaccine at 100%. So there's the hearts and minds, but the system that, kind of lays that foundation out in front of them for people to make a decision has a very large impact on which way people might, go.
Well, the people, that's where the education process comes into the play, because the truth of the matter is the people paid for that, and they paid for that greatly, because it was paid for.
Absolutely.
Right?
They paid probably a lot more for it than they would have if they had paid out of pocket.
Right. So that's the education. The government doesn't fund anything.
How many extra vaccines did they flush down the toilet because they all expired? I mean, the number was significant. I mean,
right.
That never happened if individual people were picking to pay, and there was a system that was ordering vaccines in on a basis of whether they were able to meet a demand.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. The education, when people, and you have to correct that at every turn. Every time you see a post, every time you see a government agent, if you will, an actor talking about, the government's paying for this or subsidizing this or what. No, they're not, man. The people are paying for everything. They're using our money. We have to correct that. And if we don't start correcting that every time we see it, then people will continue to believe the government pays for it without understanding it's actually them that's paying for everything.
I mean, normally I would agree with you, but in this case, my point wasn't where is the money actually coming from. My point is that the perception of people is that it's free. It's
right.
So where the money in my argument, where the money's actually coming from is irrelevant. It's how it impacts people's feelings. And in the two different scenarios, dramatically impact people's feelings, and the difference is enormous. It's night and day. So,
yeah, I understand. People do make a lot of decisions based on emotion and things like that, but their emotions are being manipulated by the government, and the way that the government is able to manipulate them goes back to what Merrick's saying: money. They have unlimited resources to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have all of these think tanks, all of these people working for them, pumping out. The whole COVID thing was nothing more than 24/7 fear mongering, and people were afraid. People were afraid to go out in public. People were washing their, products, washing off all of this stuff. And I lived through it. I didn't do any of that stuff. I never wore a mask, and I watched it all happen. And I tried to tell my friends and
neither
people,
did I.
If this was real, I should be dead right now. If this was real, as they're painting this out to you, why aren't the bodies of the homeless piling up in the streets? But they were so caught up in this 24/7 fear mongering program. It's amazing that some people didn't fall for it. But this goes into one of the questions that somebody asked me, and I have never answered it yet on my lives, but how do we bridge the gap between the unvaccinated and the vaccinated? Because that's quite a gap.
It's not bridgeable.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think that there's people out there that they don't speak about it. They're embarrassed. They feel like some people buy it, and that's the bottom line. But there's a lot of people that realize, and they'll never talk about it. And the way I think you bridge the gap is that I think that we're going to be able to help we're going to be able to help these people in ways that the government is not going to allow, because we're going to be able to bring in natural remedies. We're going to be able to open up all kinds of different possibilities to help. I won't say cure, because it's going to be a lot of issues, but help deal with the issues that they have moving forward, all of the adverse reactions and events. And instead of gaslighting them in the hospitals and pumping them full of more pharmaceuticals, then we're going to be able to actually help get these people back on track and open up. And then the human mind, we have the ability to create the most amazing things. And if we don't have a governing structure that's blocking research into natural healing, whether it's frequency healing or any of them kind of things, if we have nobody in there blocking all that, then our ingenuity, human ingenuity, is amazing. I think we can do a lot to save people's lives.
And you're right. People don't want to talk about that. They're upset or they feel raped or pillaged by the vaccine mandates. The point that I'm trying to make is that all of this discussion that we're having, our audience that you are after, Gordon, doesn't exist. It exists in people who are not woke. They don't have the concept of what you're doing. I understand it totally, what you're doing. And we're not going to change. My daughter was a total 100% leftist. She was raised through the education system that way. She was completely on that side. Let's not even go to the fact that we moved out of the city and are on a well now, and she's not getting all the chlorinated junk that's there. And all of a sudden, she now thinks she's not what she used to think she was. Isn't that funny how that works as you get off the town water? But the only way to change anything is through the education system. And I'll give an example, and it's going to take 20 years to do it. It takes 3 generations to fundamentally change. You have what's called the Overton window, which can happen very quickly. In the demoralization state of the communist way of how to turn a country into a communist country, demoralization could last anywhere from 6 months to 20 years. And we have been demoralized for the last 20 years, and it continues to go on. And just when they think they're getting to the right point of demoralization, they go to this next point where you got people that are completely hopeless now of change of anything. Now it's fear-based voting so that A doesn't capture B, and if you vote for C, then A is not going to get elected, and can't vote for C because then B won't get elected. That's the media draw. But we need to fundamentally change our education system. That's a provincial responsibility. Simply this, and I'll tell you how it's possible. I'm not advocating this. I'm just telling you how it is possible. And I've had tens of thousands of parents come to me and say, this is the right way to do it. Can't do it without a majority government. Attach the funding to the child. Regionalize. Your funding stays in the region. I'll just give you an example. It's $12,585 for each child in the education system in the province of Ontario as of last year. I haven't done the math for this year yet. If you take that, and where I live just outside of Kemptville, Ontario, that's my region, the Leeds and Grenville School Board around here, right? All of that funding goes into your region. It stays there. Parents control that pot of funding. If you want your kids to be educated by the public or the Catholic system, then you send your money to that, and 100% of that money goes there. Less than 30% of it goes to this region. If that parent doesn't like the woke agenda, the DEI agenda, the UN DRIP agenda, the UN human rights agenda, then you can go ahead and hire your own. You can hire your mother, your grandmother, your parental unit friends that you know, or you can go to the local Montessori school, or you can go to your Catholic, your Muslim, your Hindu cultural center and have them teach what is there. And it's not that it's a better system. It does 2 things. It removes the power of the politicians in regards to the union control that is spread across this province in the major metropolitan centers, which requires the Conservatives to be lefty-leaning to be able to retain those seats in the ring around the GTA, North Bay, Sudbury, and Ottawa. With those 4 areas, they can actually have a majority government if the Conservatives can't get around the outside rims and get inroads. But if we can,
and it'll force the education system to compete and to want to do better.
It depowers unions and it depowers the agenda. And if people actually could control, it's not like you're going to get $15,000 in your hand. It's going to be a voucher, and that voucher will be paid out quarterly to your provider. Everybody that wants to be a provider has to register with the government so that they know where to send the check. That's simple as that. And that could be your grandmother. You could be a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids and take in 6 kids and make, 70, 80 grand a year doing that. But the key thing is that it depowers the power of the unions to be able to influence government in regards to education.
Yeah. And dictate.
13 third-party advertisers in the last 3 elections, and they were all teachers unions, you know, Canadian Coalition of Families and all these other different types of unionized things that were out there on the social media sphere spewing hate against, can't mention it, conservatives, and can't say I'm NDP or liberal. But that only exists because of the strength of the unions and the control that it has over the GTA and the high urban centers. So it would take 3 generations of that going on, providing we could keep 3 generations of government in power, to be able to untrain and unscrew the mess that they've done to our children. That's one way of doing it. That's the only way to get it out of the state's control. Like, I don't know if it was Gordon or Brendan that said that we need to take the control away from the state. And when parents control the funding, then the more things a parent controls, or your healthcare option controls, healthcare being the same thing stays in your region, no more can the Queen's Park say, I'm going to fix the education system. No more can unions say, the government is cutting classroom sizes and all these ads you hear on the radio. And no more will they be able to say, if you elect an NDP government, we're going to fix the problem of healthcare, and we're going to fix education, and we're going to do this. And conservatives, we care, and what's important to your children. We believe in family values, and vote for us. The truth is that they own it all, just like Gordon keeps coming back to. It's all a system of ownership. And the only way that you can, it's not libertarian, but it is a practical solution way to remove the power and authority of the state over our children, and creating the woke, gender bender, mentally ill children that we have today. And I don't mean that negatively. It is the government creating that. It is created through indoctrination. And I'm a libertarian. We were founded by gays and lesbians. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't really matter. I could care less. What you bring to the table is important to me. I learned that in the Army. I spent 30 years in the Army, 13 missions, twice wounded. So the absolute thing that I do know is that everybody's individual talents, no matter who they are, what religion they are the only thing that matters, and what they bring to the table matters. Everything else of words means nothing. Nothing.
I honestly believe that all of us could actually fix it all.
Yeah.
You know, I really do. Now, I agree with Linda. She says the existing education system should be demolished, reintroduce an alternative teaching learning system. Yeah, I would like to see a free flow. Like, if you have a genius in a classroom that can go do 3 grades in 1 year, we should facilitate that genius. You know, and one size fits all education doesn't work. It needs to be fluid.
Regurgitation, regeneration, and do what I tell you authoritarian rules are the only thing that dominates our classrooms now. Compliance, solidarity, whatever. I can't remember what the word is. You got to be part of the group. You got to be. That's great in a football team. You got to be part of the team, and cohesiveness is great in the Army. But it's not. Each individual child has their own gifts. We won't even go with the vaccine schedule that's being exposed by RFK. Like, I could go on for days. And Gordon, I'm a natural person. I grow my own incorn wheat. I grow all my own things. Fenbezinol, I never can get that word. Ivermectin, comfrey, mullein. These are all things that I do for myself, for my own healing. So,
this is good.
I think you're absolutely right there, Mark, about taking that source of funding and putting it in the hands of parents in order to direct that, because it absolutely has to be based on that.
Yeah.
I also know that there's a system in the States, a friend of mine actually had implemented on a municipal level, where instead of funding on an individual level, you issue tax credits. And so in your taxes, when you're paying them, you can pay those taxes directly to a educational institution, and then attach the receipt in your taxes as taxes paid. And so that way everybody can can direct funding as well. I mean, it works better in the United States because it's on a
Well,
municipal
we do
level,
have
and
that
it's
here in Canada. You can elect
easier
your,
to do that.
your property taxes to either the Catholic or the public board. So, I mean, it's
Yeah,
irrelevant
but
because
you
it all gets
you can't
redistributed anyway.
you can't write a receipt to your grandmother to do the to do it, or to a Waldorf school or a Montessori school. I mean, the private schools are double taxed. The income is taxed on that again.
Yeah, you know, at the local Montessori school, it's $11,000 a year to send your child there. The curriculum is 6 months long.
Well, guys, I gotta go. It was nice meeting you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming, Brendan. And we'll see
Gordon,
you.
I'd never heard of you before today. I'm going to look you up, my friend, because I love what you have to say and I love your passion behind it. I love your passion behind it. I'm libertarian, but man, you have done your research. You have done your research. You hit the. Nobody would understand that. What are you talking about? Some kind of native instigator, you know, because the way you're talking is like the evil man is taking over my land. Well, it's not your land. It was never like Freeman on the land. Like I'm very depth. I spent a week with the people that were at the Freedom Convoy, the Freeman on the land that was going to serve the blah, blah, blah. I don't believe in that because it still depends upon the state. Nobody understands the Constitution. Nobody understands the Westminster Agreement. Nobody understands the 1967 Charter of Rights and Freedom. Nobody understands that our current Constitution and Charter of Rights and Freedoms is invalid because it's not been signed by all 10 provinces. However, they are running the legal system that it is valid. The last valid document is the 1967 Bill of Rights. But they've forced the courts to work with the new Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the Criminal Code inclusions in 678 times the word reasonable. When we used to have defined crimes before, we don't have it. We have reasonable crimes now. And it gives power to the police to be able to arrest instead of having lineated black and white crimes. Break and enter. Did you enter the house? That's break and enter. Now was it reasonable that they could have been there? And you can be arrested on that. So, Gordon, I'm going to look you up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The Bill of Rights. Okay, so that's interesting too, because remember, if the federal government doesn't have any authority, then what gives the Bill of Rights authority? Because it was the federal government that designed the Bill of Rights, and they don't actually have any authority. So the Bill of Rights on that level is really no good to us. And the way they get around the Bill of Rights, a lot of people say, you can use the Bill of Rights, but the way they get around that in the courts is the Bill of Rights has even in their legal world, it really doesn't hold any weight in the provincial system.
No,
everybody's going
federal.
Right, federal. So they always put you through provincial court, so it doesn't hold any weight there because the provinces weren't agreed to the Bill of Rights, but it doesn't have any authority. The big thing with education, healthcare, all of these things that we talk about, there's a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of people out there that know these professions to a better level than I do. But the one thing I know that we have to do is end the corporatocracy. Everything is run by a corporation. We live in this corporate slave world on every level, and it's all about money. And the education system is going to take, I don't think it's going to take 20 years. It's going to take some time before the kids go through the process and they're educated properly. Yeah. But keep in mind, it's a state right now that's controlling what they're being taught. So that's why they're being educated to become good citizens. And we can educate them properly. It can still be tied to the state, if you will, but we're not working in the confines of their structure. We're not trying to work our way around the existing structure. That's, I guess, the biggest thing. We're not trying to figure out how we can have a better education system within this existing structure. The idea is to fix the structure on all of the levels.
Totally agree. I totally agree.
It seems a bit overwhelming, and then when you said earlier about, a lot of people don't get this and so on and so forth, the path to I don't know what the people are going to decide. It's up to the people ultimately. But there is a path to success, and the path to success can happen really quickly if enough people are on board and enough people are willing to do the work. And it's not so much social media. There's part of it, and it's not so much going to be in the mainstream media. It's going to be talking locally to all of the people in the public. And why I say that's the most critical part of building this out is because You know, you can look at the numbers over the last bunch of years. Pretty close to 50% of the people don't take part in this fraudulent election system. And maybe they don't understand things to the level that some of us do, but they don't, because they know their voice doesn't matter in this structure. Those
Right.
people want real change. So you can't, but you can't approach that group of individuals unless you're promoting actual real change to the structure of the system that they're avoiding because they don't want to take part. The only way you can start talking to them is show them that you're going to do something that's actually real to change the structure of the system. You understand?
And totally. And that's the message where we are at. And I'm not trying to promote anything, but you know, with healthcare and education and property rights, your MPP actually having power that you represent instead of being loyal to a party. Those are things that people can understand. It doesn't change their voting, but it does open that comment. It does open that conversation up for people to see it and maybe ruminate over it, like I did for 2 years before I signed on to be a libertarian. I was a conservative for 30 years, only because I wasn't a liberal, not because I cared about anything. I just was anti-liberal, so I voted conservative. Not because I never read a policy paper, not one. And there was something I wanted to say, but I can't remember it right now. If we don't, it's going to take a major calamity collapse. I don't know. So if they take down the power grid for 2 days or something like that, and people realize that, you know, all the stuff that they're told to worry about now is irrelevant. Totally irrelevant.
Yep.
You
But
know,
I sent his party link through your messenger, Mark.
thank you.
And it's also his name is linked to the thing, so you can friend him on Facebook as well, and watch his lives. He does that frequently.
I wouldn't say, Mark, I wouldn't say, you know, maybe this helps you and it doesn't help me, but I don't approach it the way, like, you know, when you say like the MPP having the power or anything like that, I think people need to realize that it isn't about the MPP or the MP or anybody having any power. It's about those people serving their needs.
And there is a problem that the laws don't apply to the elect.
Yeah, currently, that's for sure.
Well, sitting ministers are protected, but from any wrongdoing that they do, any illegal or crooked or whatever you want to call it. But I'll go back. I just had it.
That's crazy.
I just had it. I wish I could remember what it was.
Like SN Lavalin.
When you talk about the leftists and the socialists, and this conversation came out, a lot of the local boards that I post on, everybody knows me as a libertarian candidate. Everybody knows me as a humanitarian. Everybody knows me as a gardener. I would love to talk to Brendan a lot more, because I do, you know, as well as I do almost, well, I'll say 70% of my own food. I have to buy my meat from outside sources because my wife and daughter won't let me kill anything. But in the debates in 2022, in the last 10 years that I've been running in elections, I always remind people when the NDP or the Liberals or even sometimes the Conservatives start banging on corporate profits and all that stuff. And I remind them that you and I, if we break the tax laws, are subject to huge penalties. But if you're complaining about the corporations raping and pillaging and not paying their fair share, then you, the people, and I'll point at the NDP and the Liberal and the Conservative candidates, you're the one on the provincial and federal level that wrote the rules, because they're not in jail and not been deregistered as a business for breaking the law. They're following the laws that you wrote for them. So don't put on them when you're the ones giving them the authority to do that, because that's exactly what it is. That's the corporate cronyism that we talk about, right? They wouldn't be able to get away with this, because you and I can't, and you know that it's all about us paying. It's not about corporations paying. But what I'm saying is if the laws didn't exist for them to get away with it and have rich tax write-offs and tax Kearney's, you know, whatever it is, tax havens that they're all talking about, if they didn't exist, then they would be subject to the law. But they exist because lobbyists like USMCA and NAFTA made sure that they are not subject to the rules that all the rest of us are. Again, goes back to Gordon's thing about, no, it needs to come down. It needs to come down. It needs to be changed. It needs to be fundamentally changed. And I get that. I totally get it. I think it's amazing.
Well, those people, you think about it, those people spend more time, these politicians that tell people they serve them or represent them, they spend more time talking to the lobbyists than they do to the people that they're pretending to serve.
If you can even
There's
get in.
hundreds of different lobbying organizations within the federal government. They actually are within the government. They get funding from the government.
Yeah.
All of them. And they're talking, so they're making the rules for the corporatocracy as they go along.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, right? And, everything that we,
I wish I could have read some more of the comments.
Yeah, I know it's hard to keep up with that. I have to go back later and look into them. But
the next gender is sterilized. The life-ending agendas are killing more and more people. We are being outpopulated, and this isn't racist. We are being outpopulated. We've reached the tipping point of what I call white Anglo-Saxon birth rates dropped and left the room about 10 years ago. We're being out-birth rated right now from naturalized Canadian citizens. I'm not talking First Nations. That by other races, and I don't want to sound racist or anything else like that, but by immigrants. We're being outpopulated by them. And do you know that I got a friend who's got 2 kids. The first kid, they got $900 a month for child tax benefit. When my kids were younger, we were getting $30 and $60 a month. And then the second kid, they're getting $1,600 a month for. If you're popping out kids here in Canada, there's a real incentive. That's the communist, the state taking over. Next generation is being sterilized. They made your friends and families take the jab in the army, and people are dropping like flies. Yeah, they are, but don't talk about it. Actually, we got cut off in the middle of our conversation last one that Paul and I did because he said something that, boom, instantly shut off.
A religious ideology. Facebook shut me down.
Yeah.
It kept going everywhere else, but not Facebook. They just, certain words, eh? But I mean, you've come a long way. I mean, a long time ago. I mean, you sang on, was it Rudolph?
Oh my
It reminds
God.
me of you. Anyway, sorry for that. It
homeschooling works.
And
you know why homeschooling works? Because you have to have a mom go make $17.40 an hour, I think is now minimum wage in Ontario, to work at your local big box store while paying out and running the roads with their kids, and if they're lucky, getting subsidized daycare. You'd be far better off to live with less debt and keep that mom at home. In Ontario 10 years ago, the Ontario government said when they were trying to get the ECs, early childhood educators, into play, that people used to babysit. Some people had 5, 6 kids, trusted neighbors, 7, 8, 9 kids, trusted neighbors, get their kids on the bus, get them at the end of the day, parents come pick them up. The government regulated that, said, no, you can't have more than 6 children in your home, including your own, to force people to use the system. League in politics, there isn't a problem, create the problem, run a platform on it that you're going to fix the problem, and they create it.
Yeah, that's why I say the bottom line is people are going to have to accept the fact that we can't fix anything within the confines of this existing structure. And we don't get to the foundational issues. Everything else is, and we don't have 20, 30 years down the road to fix this. Like, we're running out of time. When you talk about our birth rate, our fertility rate is like 1.2, not sustainable. It takes a fertility rate of 2 to maintain a population. That's why the UN replacement migration policy is coming into play, because they're trying to replace us. And you think about the level of immigration that's taking place at this point, most of it not even legal. But what happens after this election? Let's say it's 4 years and we get another election, another chance, another kick at the can. After that election, our voices aren't going to matter.
No, it don't matter now. People don't understand that. 5.2.
We're not. Well, this is probably the last election that our voice will have a chance to make a difference and get us a chance to fix a problem.
Right. So 5.2 million people were brought in before the last election, of which 4.2 were able to vote in the last 2 elections. 4.2. That means there's another million coming this year, and a million came last year. There'll be a total of almost 7 million immigrants coming in that are being subsidized. But businesses are being subsidized for hiring them. They're getting all these social benefits that you and I don't get. And is it any wonder that they are going to vote Liberal federally for the people that gave them the opportunity to be here and all this money? It's like, must be truly like the land of milk and honey for some of these people coming from nothing. And I understand that. That's amazing. You know, that's great. We never used to give away the kind of money because we weren't interested in buying votes. But both the Conservatives and the Liberals have figured out that immigration and capturing those votes through subsidies in regards to the immigration process is a political way. It's no act by, it was totally designed that those 5.2 million new immigrants that they brought in the Trudeau years were settled in the 14 major metropolitan cities in the country of Canada, which contains 78% of all the ridings in the 338 distributed ridings in the country of Canada. So now when you add the public service, when you add the special interest groups, and I won't name them, and then you add the immigrant vote, it's almost guaranteed a Liberal majority for the next 20 years.
That's why you got to acclimate to people that aren't taking part in this, and then they got to understand this is their last kick at the can. When I go talk to people about this on an individual level, I can tell them with all sincerity and honesty that this their voice will matter in this time. That's it. Those people, it's a lot of work, but those people that aren't taking part are the people that are going to get us to the path to success. Because remember, if you got 50%, we'll just say for argument's sake, you've got all of these other parties that are disputing over the 50% that are paying attention, but they're splitting that group amongst themselves. Now you have 50% over here that's nobody's talking to, because everything else over here is fraud. Everything else over here is fraud. And if you're not going to be willing to stand in the truth that really matters, that we have got to fix the structure to the foundational level, then they're still not going to be involved. You can't go to them with half-assed bullshit.
And here's the really ironic bit, is that if you or I succeed in either one of these goals and capturing that 50%, and polls start showing that they're moving towards your party or my party ideas, A party, B party, and we actually split the vote, say, it is the only thing that will fundamentally make the other political parties change to adopt some of those ideas that caused that split in the vote. They're quite content to let the 50% or 43% or 47%, depending on the provincial or federal election, sit at home and do nothing, because they know their loyal 23% will show up for this party and 26% will show up for that party based on polls. And people, and I don't know how many people are still listening, but I want people to understand what Gordon is talking about is fundamental, inalienable rights. What is democracy? And I give this lecture every once in a while. What is democracy? Democracy is this: 100 people in a room, of which us three are part of those 100 people. And Paul is number 50, and I'm number 51. And by democracy, as being number 51, we just voted to kill Gordon. And Gordon is dead because it was a democratic vote, irrespective of whether he is guilty or not guilty. And that's the illusion of democracy. And we need to have individual rights that protect the individual to ensure that the state can never use the kind of power that democracy espouses.
Yeah. I would rather be a constitutional republic, which is why I was drawn to Gordon's party, because it's really based on reforming the Constitution.
Yeah.
And, we definitely do. We definitely need checks and balances for the government, their powers, property rights. All these things are so important. And people have been so brainwashed, they don't realize what's really happening.
Democracy is a lie anyway, because democracy is based on the consent of the governed, and we certainly don't give them consent to govern us on any level. We never did. And that would be based on the actual Constitution. That's where the consent would come from. They say it's from the voting, but the voting contracts are fraud because they're telling you they represent you when they don't. So that's not a valid consent And so they base it running off the social contract. And, you want to talk about that example you use for democracy. Well, that's exactly what happened to Socrates. And that's how Socrates got killed, based on democracy. They voted for a philosopher because he was talking about things, that the truths that people didn't want to talk about. Anyway,
Right.
democratically, they decided to kill him, not because he was harming anybody or anything like that. They just didn't want his voice. So that's what democracy will be.
And nowhere in the U.S. Constitution, when you hear U.S. politician, I hate when people talk about it, including myself, does it say the word democracy in the U.S. Constitution or
Nope.
none of the amendments. They are not a democracy. They are a constitutional republic where the individual has more rights. And you're right. I don't know who said it, but they are slowly destroying that document.
The Democrats
Yeah.
love
I gotta
saying-
go. I gotta go. My wife's
Right,
coming
buddy.
home, and my only role in life is to look after my farm and look after my wife. And she's on her way home, and I got to get tea and
All right,
supper on
brother.
the table.
Yeah, I can close it off. I appreciate you coming. Thanks, Mark.
Good
And
chat.
I will bring you back. I hope you will come back. And
I will always come back, and I think we should get Sean. That's it. My closing statement is: I'm no longer the leader. It is Sean Conroy. He is an amazing young man who's 1,000 times more politically savvy than me. He has got his head switched on tight. He runs circles around my speak, and that's pretty hard to do.
yeah, but you're my favorite so far. So
Yeah, he's very, very much switched on, and I look forward to supporting him.
yeah, I would have to get him on for sure and listen to what he has to say. I would like people to know what their options are and what the consequences of these options are. But have a great night, and thank you again, Mark, for joining us. It's just me and you, brother.
Yep.
And I guess we could prepare to close it off for this session. And I thank you so much for coming back. We know we have sometimes to log in and out 10 times before we get things running right, but it's worth it because I think what we have to say is important.
I think I got it figured out this time. We'll see next time, but I think I got it figured out. I made some changes that I found I didn't recognize, but anyway, we'll see what happens next time.
Yeah, and the party, for anyone listening, the party information, Nationalist Constitution Reform Party, is in the comments, so you can go to the page and join and become an active member. And Gord is also on Facebook. He's tagged on this post, on this live, so you can make friends with him and watch his lives and make an informed choice in the future. And I appreciate you very much, Gord. Any final words you'd like to say before we close?
Yeah, so for anybody out there watching, don't know me or anything like that, I guess the easiest way to deal with this is go to the party website, have a look at it. The platform's pretty clear. I think it separates us from all the other political party pretty easily because it's real about the significant changes we have to make. Go through it. Maybe you don't understand it all, but at that point, reach out to me. There's an email there that you can contact me through the website, or you can contact me via Facebook. Paul's put my link up. Get your questions answered, your concerns addressed, and once you're comfortable with that, then just come on board and let's help build this out, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to try to address all the issues people have. And maybe you don't agree with me, and that's fine too. But if you don't ask me the questions and voice your concerns, then I can't explain them or deal with them for you. So just don't make assessments based on things looking a little bit too extreme, because we are living in the most extreme times of our lives, and extreme change is going to be necessary to fix this. That's the way I see things. So I appreciate you, Paul. Thanks very much again, and it was a good chat.
Absolutely. And thank you all at home for watching us. I will be back soon with a new episode, and I hope to see you all then. Thank you.